Can we do something about the fern here? But there's so much tension that typically happens, even at the highest levels in these large corporations. There's such a tension between those two groups many times.
I think you and I could really fight about this.
So I kind of came up with the idea of influencer just because I do see so many people wanting to be influencing, and I just they're hard not to troll. It's actually people don't really know this, but it's a little known fact. But it should people should know. Rain is not wet in Canada, so it's one of the they just don't need it.
Okay, so the commonly misunderstood code issues. We're gonna list them off kind of quick. And then I'm going to ask you to rapid fire help explain the misconceptions.
Sure.
Hey, how's it going? It's the Hook Better Leads podcast, and I have Mike Goldenstein on today. How you doing, sir?
Can we do something about the fern here?
Yeah, Jack, the placement of this fern is a little off. Okay, thank you. God, Jack. Oh, he's dumping it now. Jack. Edit this out.
Seriously.
Oh my God.
Is this minimum wage, I hope?
Yeah, he's an intern. He's not making anything. Yeah. All right, we're talking about code compliance and 10 roofing codes that you may not know enough about. You suck at code and we're gonna help you.
Yeah.
So Mike, could you give us a little bit of your background? Why code? How'd you get into code?
Yeah, so I actually started in the roofing industry in 1992, and not the sexy kind with the big tires and the fancy trucks and the big sales teams. I was mostly an installer for a majority of that 18 years. Had my own company for about 10 of those. And then in 2012, actually, that's when code itself, so it's written by ICC. Every 3 years, they come out with a new version. And at that time, I was a manufacturer rep. And they had changed it so that the final seat to authority in determining what is code compliant and what's not ended up at the manufacturer's feet instead of the local code official. Back in my day when we were actually roofing and installing, I had to go to every city and find out what the codes were because every city could be different based on that code official. And now they just said, now code was saying whatever the manufacturer says.
Oh, I forgot to say at the beginning, we're also going to be talking about Mike's stint, his influencing. He calls himself the influencer, but it's really it's because he wishes he was an influencer, from what we understand.
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what.
And he also his feet don't hit the ground. If we could pan to that, Jack, his feet do not hit the ground.
I'm a bit vertically challenged.
Yes.
If you hadn't noticed.
So he's kind of said that a little bit about his influencing online, but if you could explain what an influencer is real quick for our audience.
Yeah, so I kind of came up with the idea of influencer just because I do see so many people wanting to be influencing, and I just they're hard not to troll, to be honest. And
so the number one profession that kids want to be these days is YouTuber.
Yeah,
and essentially it kind of goes along with the influencing thing. So it's like basically, but we all can't be influencers. It can't be everybody influencing everybody.
Well, we can't be, but I do think that the cream does kind of rise to the top, right? I mean, there's some people that genuinely, when I see them post something, I always stop because they're going to say something good that I enjoy.
But you also stop when you want to cringe at something.
Oh man,
there's a lot of
there's some cringe.
You cannot because cringe. So I am a master of cringe. It's honestly my influencing style. No, but the reason cringe works so well for real, like for instance, we have a roofing client, Josh Swisher, North Face Construction. We're both worked with.
That's
them
where you and I first met.
Yes, because we did a
shingle competition,
fastest shingling competition back in 2020 or something.
Something like that.
So, but anyways, they've gone viral several times, and a couple of them have been good. But some of them have been because everyone wants to tell them they're using the nail gun wrong or something. Yeah. So it's really easy to go viral or to have these, when there's a lot of hate in the comments for some reason.
Yeah, but isn't that the whole point though? Because you can get 2-3 million views on it. Is it, number one, you can't make it up, right? I mean, you try to go viral and you won't. Some of my best stuff, I do basically my stuff because I want to entertain myself, and some of the stuff I really think is funny. We did this one where I thought it'd be kind of funny. It was at an Atlas event. It was at Michigan Stadium. We were kicking field goals. I'm like, that would be really funny if Leanne Koppel would be Lucy and I would be Charlie Brown, and she would pull the ball out and I'd go flying. I'm like, that's kind of funny, right? I think it got like, a good 4 or 5 views on it. And
but tell the truth. You always say that. He always says he gets 2 views, but was it like 200, 300 views?
I don't know.
He won't say it.
But I mean, you could look it up. It's on American Contractor Show. They put it together, and it was really. They even did it even better because they actually put they added the actual Charlie Brown dialogue between Lucy and Charlie Brown, and then I go flying. So that's the stuff that entertains me, and that's primarily why I do stuff. But again, it can go viral. But then does it actually even lead to a sale? You had one to go viral.
Yeah, so we just hit 10 million views on a video, and I am proud of that because I wanted to go viral. I wanted to go viral just to check it off my list, and also to just be real about what is the value of that. So for me, somebody who services niche, like people like contractors, home services, roofing, for me to go viral, it doesn't really help me a ton because most of those people looking at it are not in that situation. And then also, like I said, like a lot of times it's negative stuff. So there's a lot of negativity, and that's part of why it went viral. So it's like, it doesn't help us that much. I always tell Jack, so Jack's our video guy over here, he's actually awesome. He has a meme that's in niche, and that gets 10,000 views. That's way more powerful to me and way more important than us going to 10 million views with something out of niche.
Yeah, I would just do, as long as I would go bacterial, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
Most of my stuff just goes moldy as an influencer, but if I could just do bacterial, but I mean, that's the whole point though. And I think we talked about this a bit, that space in between, and this is, I also like to troll our marketing department, right? Because the sales and marketing have a very different view about business and how you grow business. And as primarily a salesperson, like, I could throw stuff out and it'll go to 1,000 people or 1,500 people, but is there actually, until I pick up the phone, call them, make a sale, like that's real results. Whereas just throwing stuff out, and again, that's my perception of things.
Hey, you got to love on marketing to...
I do.
Here's the deal. I've always been on the marketing side of that fight. I've usually been on the marketing side of that fight. We'll get right back into code issues. So this is a diversion from our main purpose here, but I want to wrap it up with a few more things here. When we're doing events are like a really clear, like you either sell the tickets and people show up or they don't. And we've had good ones and we've had bad ones over this last year. We've probably been a part of like 18 events or something like that. And the best ones have had a very sales-driven component. Marketing even could get you 80% of the way with 100 people. Yeah. But unless somebody like reaches out to people directly, sometimes they don't buy the ticket. So there's a little bit of an element of you do need to have sales closed deals. And it doesn't matter how ripe you make the audience with marketing, there has to be a deal closing component.
Yeah, and there's such a synergy that starts happening after a while between sales and marketing, because as the sales start growing, maybe they're setting those logs, and then over time that's growing, and then you're fueling it with more marketing. Now, because at the end of the day, sales is never going to have the reach that marketing has, and marketing is probably never going to have the close percentages sales are. But together, and particularly over a few years, you can grow some really, really dynamic numbers and grow your business successfully. But there's so much tension that typically happens, even at the highest levels in these large corporations. There's such a tension between those two groups many times.
Yeah, it's like when sales, I think you and I could really fight about this. When sales takes too much credit is where marketing gets like, fuck.
Oh, man. There's nobody on the planet that has bigger egos than the marketing department. Seriously. If we're talking about egos, we're talking marketing first, and then the salespeople are the ones that actually just get it done.
Oh, wow.
You said we could talk about it.
I really love that idea because I would love to, like, if you could visualize the salesperson's ego versus the marketing's just kind of walking around like,
oh my gosh,
just like kind of timid, just trying to show their giant creative muscles. And then the sales guy comes in and is just like, I did that.
And this completely mutilates a Photoshop. And then it becomes a thing, right?
Well, I'll be real. Your mutilated Photoshops are incredible. Okay, so let's get into code issues. This has been a good talk. I think we can both agree that marketing carries more weight. No, just kidding.
Most likely.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps other people see this content. We're back every Tuesday and Friday with the podcast, and we've got a ton of other videos. Thanks, guys.
Join the future of roofing at offers.roofle.com. Stand out, save time, earn more.
Okay, so the commonly misunderstood code issues. We're going to list them off kind of quick, and then I'm going to ask you to rapid fire help explain the misconceptions.
Sure.
So just the 10 real quick. Decking thickness, wind speeds versus warranties, requirements versus recommendations, product compatibility, 4 to 6 inch underlayment overlap rule, 2-layer repairs, damage to roofing assembly, valley damage, drip edge, and last one is code enforced. And we have a number of questions. We have some other questions after that, but rapid fire, like in a minute or less for each of these.
Yeah.
What is the misconception with decking thickness?
Okay, so basically when you're talking about ICC, which is the IRC governs basically 49 out of 50 states. I joke about this a little bit, but Wisconsin was a little bit different. I think there was a couple of guys at a bar stool over a couple of brews that drew with crayon on a napkin and came up with their codes. They're the only ones that I know that are really significantly different. But for everybody else, you're on either the IRC or a version of it. And really, you're talking about one chapter, the 900s. That is the roofing assembly chapter. Now, I started actually changing recently because an equally important one to me was the administration code, which is chapter 1. You got 13 chapters in code, and really there's only 2 that matter to 95% of the codes that a roofer engages
So
in.
you're saying if you studied these 2, you'd know everything you know.
You're gonna be no, I wouldn't say that, but I mean there's a lot of experience that comes with it. But the hard part, I think, but yes. I mean, seriously, yes.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of things, and decking thickness is one of them because you have to jump outside of the 900s because the 900s literally says has to be a nailable substrate.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, what? That's okay.
And
That's
it's
it?
really confusing because there's a little bit of rotting.
Exactly.
And then it's like, what is this? And that's why there's so much like.
So we don't say rot because rot has a whole other system of because you can't. That's not going to be damaged. Yes. You can't put a date. Of loss to rotted decking, so it's non-nailable.
Yeah.
You don't care why. The fact is, you're tasked with repairing the assembly, and you have a non-nailable surface. Now, this is where it kind of jumps between manufacturer-driven code, and I call it manufacturer-driven code and the IRC-driven code. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's both, and it's really fun. But decking is one of them that you have to actually jump over to 908.1 803.1, which is outside of the 900 section, which confuses a lot of people because now you're no longer in there. But on 803, it talks about lumber decking with a little subnote underneath it that says if you're talking about CDX or OSB, you got to jump to 503.2.1.1, which is a whole different. Now people are all confused. So there's a common misconception out there. You see it on Facebook all the time. I think people are getting wildly confused about decking because 803.1 says it's got to be 5/8.
Okay.
But that's lumber. That's not engineered. That's lumber. So if you've got deck boards, that's what has to be 5/8. If it's CDX, plywood, or OSB, now you're in the 500 section, which also doesn't make any sense because that's actually the flooring section.
You'd think if they wanted people to follow this shit, they'd make it clearer.
Well,
it is clear?
Okay, but still, you're talking about 13 chapters. How many times we do read, right? Most people read?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Right? So, yes, I can understand the confusion because you're being stretched a little bit. But come on, guys. We make a very good living. I love this industry. I love the roofing industry because of there is a low barrier to entry into this. But I hate this industry because there is a low barrier entry, and anybody can be a roofer at any time and not know anything.
Low barrier to entry. I'm just kidding. All right, let's get into number 2: wind speeds versus warranties. Why does this matter? What's the misconception?
My gosh, this was really fascinating because even code officials messed this up. We actually have a teacher in Minnesota here that teaches people how to. He trains them in their continuing education, and he doesn't even know. So he's saying that 3-tab shingles are no longer code compliant because they come with a 60-mile-an-hour wind warranty. Well, wind warranties and wind Ratings are a completely different thing. Wind warranties come from the manufacturer. They say, over the course of time, we are warranting these shingles to perform up to 60 mile an hour wind speeds. Whereas the wind speed rating is coming from a third party, ASTM, that determines whether or not they are compliant. You'd think that you just sit back and go, it's ridiculous that a manufacturer would create and manufacture and spend millions of dollars making a product that's illegal to install. It shouldn't make any sense. And that's why I should say, guys, just relax a little bit. Use your common sense. They're not illegal coming out of the package. Wind speed warranties are different than wind speed ratings. Now, what I would like them to do, because actually when you look into code, it's Class A, Class H, Class F, Class G. There's different classes that are correlating with a letter, but they also correlate with wind speed. They put 120 miles per hour, 150 miles per hour, and then as soon as people say 120 miles per hour, and this is only warranted to 60, well, 60 isn't 120, so it can't be compliant. I get the confusion, but come on. All shingles by every manufacturer, I haven't seen one that is not compliant. Everything is going to do at least 90 miles an hour, which would be compliant. But
okay, I've got the third one, which is requirements versus recommendations. What do you mean by this? Why is this a misconception?
So this happens a lot when they're talking with code officials. Well, not with code officials. Sometimes with code officials, but actually it was a code official that really taught me this idea. It really happens with adjusters that are calling them and say, yeah, but that's the recommendation from the manufacturer. But if they require it, then it becomes code. But if you look at code never says anything about required or recommends. It just says what's published or approved. So it doesn't matter. To me, I don't care if the manufacturer requires it, suggests it, recommends it, or says this is probably a pretty good idea. If it's in writing, if it's published or approved by that manufacturer, then it's considered code. Now, the difference
That's a little weird though, right? Because a manufacturer can then essentially it's almost like making an obligation for an insurance company because of their, or am I wrong?
Well, so we're going to be able to get into a little bit of uniformity at this case because some of them are going to be judgment calls. We're going to get to that one in one of the later ones. Okay. But at the end of the day, though, there are options or alternatives, right? So if they're recommended this way, but you can also do it this way, now you've got two different areas and you can go one way or another, and you can. That's where your flexibility comes from. But at the end of the day, if it's in writing, if it's but here's the other reason.
I've got a big question for you too. After that, I got a random one for you.
Okay. The other reason why it's really important though is because as soon as you start getting the requirements on a manufacturer's part, you have a lot of obligations with the warranties, and those can put a sticky wicket. So really, what we're trying to do is allow everybody to stay in their own sandbox. I have this sandbox thing that I bring out in all of my different trainings, and we want everybody to be able to stay in their sandbox. We don't want the manufacturer jumping into the code officials' sandbox. We don't need the adjusters jumping into the contractors and vice versa and all that kind of stuff. So,
why do Canadians think they don't need underlayment? And so I was told underlayment actually is the waterproof barrier. How is that just fine for them?
Yeah,
because there's good manufacturers in Canada not doing this because it's not code or whatever.
Yeah, it's actually people don't really know this, but it's a little known fact. But it should. I mean, people should know. Rain is not wet in Canada, so it's one of the, they just don't need it. I do have some things about code in Canada, and it's probably not what you think.
I'm just so curious.
They are so far ahead of the United States. Yeah. I swear to God. And the underlayment thing is different. That is weird. And I don't know why that is, because for the most part, the roofing assembly, as determined by the manufacturers, are all going to call for it, but code doesn't. It is a weird thing, and they don't do it. However, there are so many other things because of the harshness of the winters and stuff like that. They are so far ahead of understanding vapor barriers and retarders as far as in the assembly of the home and the envelope of the home. Moisture migration in the United States is killing homes. And it's, I mean, we can go into this. I mean, it's really fantastic. I get nerdy.
Briefly go into it. I apologize. I know that we're going very fast, but you can turn YouTube down to like a 0.75 speed if you really need to. But we're going fast because he has a plane to catch after this.
I do. But it's okay because I'm in the back of the plane, so I can be on the last person on the plane. I'll get my seat. What's fantastic about building envelopes is a lot of it has to do with moisture migration. At the end of the day, what ends up happening is the longer your house is ventilated and continue to stay dry, and the longer it will last. Well, back in the 40s and 50s, these were, nobody had to worry about ventilation because the whole thing just bled, right?
Yeah.
It was air everywhere. But those 40s, now to keep up with code, now we're requiring energy efficient windows and house wrap and Tyvek and ice and water shield and all these synthetics that are coming on. And so you're creating a airtight barrier around a system that was created to breathe. And so you're locking in all of this warm, moist air. And warm, moist air is coming from your fake plants. Any plants, every time you breathe, every shower, do dishes, every time you do anything inside of a home, you're releasing moisture into that. That has to go somewhere. And we're tightening up our homes so much without paying attention to moisture migration. It's literally rotting our homes from the inside out, especially the older homes. Canada has figured that stuff out they're so far ahead of the United States in that realm.
But still no underlayment.
All
right, number
so they're
4.
a little bit weird.
4, product compatibility. What's the misconception here?
So product compatibility, this is where I wanted to talk about the uniformity, because it does come in, because manufacturers come out with these do not mix, right? So they discontinue a product, or they change it, or they change the color a little bit, and they go, do not mix, you can't mix it. So I'm going to make some people a little bit mad on this stuff, I think. I don't take just a regular do not mix letter as code compliance right off the bat, unless there are size differences. Now it's a compatibility issue, because now one product is not compatible with another. I don't really care the aesthetics of it, and I don't care. There's some manufacturers that
we can tell
that
by your Photoshops that you don't really care about the aesthetics.
I don't care about any. In fact, the worse they look, the better, right? So.
Well, I'll be real. I see a lot of roofers complaining in Facebook groups about the manufacturer saying this is the same color and they're so wildly different.
They're wildly different.
Well, if if the weather's probably going to mix those colors, it'll look the same eventually. It's like, no, that's far off. And also, part of the reason, I get that it's, to keep water out, but the roof is a big aesthetic piece of the house.
It is. And to me, that's a coverage issue more than a code issue.
Okay.
So if it really looks wildly different, you should have a good carrier that's going to back you up, that says, listen, you sustain damage to your property. That's the other part of it that's always missed, is the damage was sustained to the property and then to the roofing assembly. There's damage to the assembly. We should be able to have a company that's good enough to do that. What we see in the industry a lot, though, is that we take these carriers that have these stripped down policies that cover practically nothing, and then we work as contractors to try to achieve the results that they would get from a real carrier or a good carrier. And that's a whole game.
That's good.
But the do not mix. But the one thing I wanted to say about compatibility, especially when it comes to shingles, is that there are size differences that started to appear. So you went from a 5-inch exposure to a 5 5/8. Now, when you've lengthened that, now nothing lines up. That's a true compatibility issue, and you would find that in code that you would not be mixing that based on compatibility. The do not mixes, I'm a little bit more skeptical.
Top rep. We're doing top rep then. It's great training.
So you got to have that defined sales process. Check Toki specifically. I don't understand how people make it with a defined sales process as an established company, but just starting out, you definitely need to have that, because they need to know, like, and trust you through the whole process in order to give you money.
How about the 4 to 6 inch underlayment overlap rule? What's the misconception?
The misconception on that one is people, they want it to be an easy button. I texted this to John Sanek one time. I was like, because somebody wanted it. Hey, do you have an easy button for this? We're just seeing this thing. Like, just send me the document that I can send to the insurance company that pays it. And so I responded, and I gave it well, it's this, and this, and this. And the response I got back, and I texted John, I'm like, so basically he said, okay, but do you have an easier than easy button?
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
The 4 to 6 inch lap rule does necessitate if a slope is being replaced, so you're tearing off the slope, but when you put it back together, you're not just lapping 4 to 6 inches over, it actually goes underneath shingles. So now you're removing shingles to get the underlayment to that adjacent or undamaged side, and now you got to because you can't reuse those shingles because of 908.5, which is the reinstallation of aggregate surface materials. Now you're putting in all of your new shingles, and now you're right back to your do not mix, because now you've got brand new shingles sitting right next to the old shingles. And now, to me, it becomes a coverage issue. But the thing that is missed on that all the time, people are like, well, I told them about the 4 to 6 inch lap roll. Yeah, but what did you say about that? Like, did you actually make that case of what's actually happening and why it's important?
Okay, I like that. 2-layer repairs. What's the misconception?
Oh man, so 2-layer repairs. It's funny because I've quoted a couple of codes, and it's funny when you read through code, it's very generic, it's very general. It really has no detail whatsoever, which is, I think, one of the reasons why they kept pushing that issue over to manufacturers, because typically manufacturers have a lot written about all these certain things. But when it comes to 2-layer repairs, suddenly they care a whole lot. And they give you 3 bullet points. This stuff has to be there in order to do a cover over. And these have to not be there in order to do a cover over. And they really care deeply. And so one of those things is that second layer has to be a complete and it has to be a complete and I'm missing the words on it. But it has to be a complete system. That second layer is a complete system.
You're saying they shingle over existing shingles?
Yep.
Which I would say is the best underlayment.
No, it's actually the worst.
Shingles, a full shingled roof is the best underlayment.
No, because you're poking holes all over it.
Yeah.
I'm just
kidding.
There's a lot of
so
of people.
They're saying like if there's any damage on that underlayer.
Complete and separate system. That's what it's called. Yes.
Complete and separate. There we go.
So now, if you're in a situation where you're being told to remove a section and just do a small repair, now you're pulling off a shingle, so you no longer have a double layer. Now, what are you supposed to do? Like splice some stuff in? But when you put it back together, that's not a complete and separate system. So really, code cares deeply about cover overs. You have to do certain things. You can't do certain other things. So stop doing 2-layer repairs. I'm all for repairs, code compliant repairs. I cannot see a situation where you would be able to do a repair on a second layer.
Another reason to just not do layovers, I guess.
Certain parts of the country still do cover overs. Yeah.
And most of the roofing community judges them every time.
Yeah, right.
All right, so damage to roofing assembly.
Yeah, we talked about that a little quickly. It's kind of like, again, it's property insurance. That's what we're typically talking about when there's storm restoration. So if the property was damaged, then insurance is going to indemnify the homeowner for the damage that was being done. And likewise, when it comes to the roofing system, it's the roofing assembly according to code. That's why I always call it roofing assembly. The assembly is what's been damaged. Typically, when I see issues like, well, the insurance company isn't covering decking or isn't covering this, and it's typically because the contractor went too quickly to covering the damaged shingles. Well, the shingles are damaged, so we got to repair the shingles. Well, no, the shingles are not damaged. The roofing assembly has been damaged. Now you have to repair the roofing assembly without violating code. And so when you understand what the roofing assembly is, which absolutely 100% includes the decking every time, so the decking would be covered under minimum code compliance issues just as much as the nails, the underlayment, because none of that stuff was damaged by hail, but it's being covered, right? Because it's part of the assembly. The decking is also part of the assembly.
Okay, I get it. And we're all eager to replace as much of it as we possibly can for various reasons, right? But I have a question, and it's going to go against a little bit about what I know roofers like, which is to replace all of it, please.
Yeah.
Which is, the question is, aren't we wasting a lot of shit, though? You know what I mean? Like, we're wasting shingles, we're wasting wood, potentially. If it's a nailable surface, is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
If it's a nailable surface, and I'm not like a huge green guy or anything like that. I'm probably like, a regular millennial. I care a little bit, but I don't care that much.
That's a great way to say that.
I'm just curious, if you had to discard that, if you had to discard it every time, wouldn't that be pretty wasteful?
Yeah, kind of. Well, but here's the point, though, and insurance companies understand this as much as anybody too, is that as expensive as roofs are, they're not nearly as expensive as the contents inside the house. So once it becomes a leak and becomes an issue inside the house, that's when it really skyrockets the cost of
So they're trying
the
to make
entire
sure that
system.
doesn't happen.
Right, and here's the thing: nobody really knows this, but guess who? If you were looking at who pays for the lobbyists to stricter building codes on a national and local level, who is by far, no even questions asked, is not even close, spends more money pushing for tighter codes.
Insurance company?
Insurance
But
companies.
why? That's so
and
odd.
who fights them every step of the way? Contractors.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It takes 2 seconds to Google this, but
why?
because typically when they're doing this, when they're pushing for these codes, they're doing it basically on the construction of the building, because that's where the liability for the carrier is the highest, right? They need to have these structures be done correctly and done in such a way that it limits the liability of the insurance carrier, because they're having to cover this, right? And the contractors, every code that they bring up, and some of them are kind of crazy what they want you to do, increases the cost exponentially. And so contractors typically fight against it, and most of them are builders, because nobody likes regulation, right? And so it's tighter and tighter regulations being pushed, by the carriers, because they want a safer building and one that limits their liability. Meanwhile, it's escalating costs of the contractor, so they don't want them. So, but then when it comes to a claim, that's when everything switches.
Why are builders the worst at putting on roofs then? No. that is a common reputation though, that builders that do roofs.
Well, they're typically subbing it out. And and
they just
most
don't
people
know how to manage those projects as well. Or
no, because there's really no management to it.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, roofing is not rocket science.
Yeah.
But typically a general contractor, which is a builder, can hire subs, and subs that are just doing a single layer install make significantly less. So when you got the cream of the crop guys that are making good money, they're doing the tear off and the re-roof. And by the time you get down to the guys that are just installing a roof every day, it doesn't pay very well. So the work that you get may or may not be the best.
All right, let's do these last three kind of quick. We're at the 32-minute mark here. We got valley damage. What's the misconception?
Yeah, valley damage, and again, this is open valleys. This is mostly what you see in the north because it sheds snow and ice better. But there are 6 code violations from pulling out that metal. Because here's the thing: when it's metal, it gives a perfect picture of what happened with the storm that came through with the hail specifically. And so you'll have a lot of carriers that'll say, well, just pull out that dented metal because there really wasn't much damage to the shingles. Pull out the metal, put new metal in, and we've paid it. But there are code implications. There's 6 code violations that you would create from putting in the valleys and taking them out. I'll end with that one because that one gets in the weeds quite a bit.
Do you have something that you can give away for that? Because we could maybe drop it in the comments.
Yeah, you could. It's a combination of things. So this is
that sounds incredible, to be honest.
It really is, but this is what becoming an expert in your craft. And really, I think one of the benefits of me spending 18 years as an installer, I understand how things go apart and put back together in a roofing assembly. And you have to be able to identify, all right, literally what's going to happen. I'm going to have to take these shingles off. I'm pulling the metal out. Now I got underlayments going back in along with metal and then shingles. That can't be right. That's not the only way. You're missing, 3-4 steps to the system. Not to mention the compatibility of materials and all that kind of stuff. So,
do you think that part of the reason that some people get very frustrated with the carriers and stay frustrated is because they don't know enough about the real work that goes into putting on a roof, and so they're kind of just, it's paper contractor problems?
Yeah, 100%. You're going to expose me for a little bit. I'm going to get some hate mail for this one too.
Okay.
I think the reason why there's so much friction between carriers and contractors is because the contractors don't really know what they're talking about. And even when I'm insisting that they go to the code official and say, present this stuff and try to pull a permit, but not pull a permit to get it denied, say, I need a variance for this code item, this code item, this code item. That's a great way to interact with the code official, because code official, that allows him to stay in his sandbox. Contractor stays in theirs, adjuster stays in theirs. You're asking for a variance that can't happen. The problem is, I do think most contractors don't understand code well enough to go up and present that to a code official.
And I'm actually saying they might not understand the roof assembly.
100%. That's what I'm saying too.
Yeah.
Like they'll be able to take a do not mix letter and take it and try to beat the adjuster over the head with it and say, you owe for it because this is a compatibility issue, and they start throwing these cliff notes, or they have a cliff notes version of code that they've seen on social media they think makes sense, and it might to an adjuster. But try to take that to a code official.
Yeah.
Now you actually have to understand it.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where, we talk about, if John Cenac and I really that's how we met. We were talking about code issues like this, and then when he was in Minnesota, Tim Johnson and I and him did this class together, and he has implemented so much code into his classes now because you have to understand this stuff. You can't just be throwing stuff out hoping it sticks to a wall. I mean, yeah, it might help or might work with an adjuster every once in a while, but picture yourself going to a code official and saying, hey, this is how it's done, and have him either laugh at you. I mean, that's the fear, right? They're going to laugh at you because you don't really understand how it works.
We've got 2 left, and we're going to go quick.
All right, really quick.
Excuse me, drip edge. What's the misconception?
Drip edge, I will make this quick. Some states eliminate drip edge as a requirement. So it is actually in the IRC, in the unamended version of it. It is in there. It is required. I would say probably a third of the states, it's not required at all. And it's difficult to put it in as a requirement from manufacturers because they typically give you alternatives. So drip edge is one of the hard ones. If you're trying to get paid by using code arguments, it's a tougher one.
Is code enforced?
That's a 100 level, 100 chapter, right? So that when you're talking about the administration of code, there's a lot of really rich information. That's where I got the, asking for a variance on code compliance issues. You have to know your 100 section as much as you know your 900 section. It is absolutely enforced with or without a permit. If the state adopts it, it is enforced no matter where you're at.
And what are you inviting people to do after this, since you have a Facebook group, right?
I do have a Facebook group. It's called What's That Roofing Code? ? And you're welcome to join that. And we have discussions like this every day. We have people coming in asking questions, and we invite them to do so. So
there's a lot of roofing groups, but there's a little bit of if it's not for that purpose, you might get people that don't know what the F they're talking about in some of these other groups.
Yeah.
So you have people like yourself adminning this group that wants you to get the right answer.
Yeah.
So join What's That Roofing Code now.
Yep.
There will be a link in the comments.
And if you go in there, if you've been in the business for 30 years, I think you'll learn something. And if you're brand new to the industry, I think you'll learn something. And feel free to ask dumb questions because we will not make you feel stupid. We want to get the information out. We want people to understand and know how to have these conversations with code officials, with their homeowners, and with the adjusters.
And I think it's kind of bold of Roofle. So he's part of Roofle. Roof Quote Pro is a tool that allows you to get quotes on your website. And it's bold of them to hire somebody like yourself with this much information. What are they trying to do over there? Why do they need a guy like you?
Well, I mean, again, it is part of the future, and we're watching another evolution in the industry. And it's led by technology, but it's also going to be addressing the friction points at carriers and contractors. I think you're going to see companies like ours that are coming in to help with that friction point. We're going to be evolving and transforming the industry for sure.
And just little things that they've upgraded recently, like they have suggested slope now, which all these little things, it's nice to have a guy like you around to help work through some of these other things. And I know that you can also message Mike Goldenstein on Facebook to get a demo, or just go to roofle.com. And then things like they have Rep Quote Pro now, which you can give it out to your different reps, and they have their own link and their own analytics dashboard, so they can see where people are checking out their tool. Yeah, because ours is just a great tool. It's a great technology, but it's just great technology. We need somebody like Hook Agency to come in and actually plug it in and get traffic streaming through your website to get an instant estimate through your website. But at the same time, if you don't have great traffic through your website, you can still put it on your phone or iPads of your canvassers or your salespeople, and they can do them instantly on going door to door. And some people might be scared of this. There's a little bit of this could replace a sales rep one day or something like that. But we're not at that point yet, guys. We're at that point where we're making it easier for people to see what an idea of their roof might cost. Yeah. And it's good for your reps. It's good for your reps not to. I heard Martin on the podcast with you and Martin, which was really good, by the way. Go check that out. Martin Pettigrew from Monarch Roofing, which is an overlapping client of Roofle and Hook Agency. And he was essentially saying people like are more likely to like their Google leads because they're a little bit more qualified.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's a really good way to put this, is like to qualify your leads a little bit more.
Yeah.
This tool could really help you decrease the amount of tire kickers and things like that.
Yeah. People are scared to put a price online. They really are. And I understand why. But it is fear itself that you're scared of, because once you start doing it, your salespeople are going to love it. The leads are so qualified. They're already price conditioned. They're going to be the easiest leads that they're running with. And there is such a trust that's built between you and your consumer. You're going to be 10 steps ahead of your competition because you've already gotten past that part of it. So check it out. Don't be afraid to put it on just for fear itself. Check for yourself and look at the analytics on it.
And if if you're promoting the heck out of this thing, you're going to have a better result. So obviously check out Hook Agency if you need more flow. And the podcast is put on by hookagency.com, Hook Agency all over social. And we really appreciate you subscribing to the YouTube channel, subscribing on podcasts. What is it? What is the iTunes podcast thing? Apple Podcasts. And you guys have a good one. Bye-bye.